Nedum, a big statement from City today.
Yeah, you could say that. I think in some ways Luton probably played into City's hands with some of the man-to-man marking they had at the back, and City very much, had so many runners in this game today, more so than we've seen in other games, and I think it was perfect for their attacking line. But I think Haaland himself is somebody who gets questioned a lot when he's not scoring, when you see him missing those chances. But today, to walk off the field with 5 is such a unique experience for him, and so few people. But it was a great performance, great assist by Kevin De Bruyne as well. And he managed to keep Rodri on the bench rested, and Phil Foden as well. So things are looking up for them, barring that sort of injury for Jack Grealish.
It's interesting, Craig. He got 5. He could legitimately have got 7 today.
Yeah, Luton played into the hands a little bit, but the story really isn't Luton Town. But when you leave that amount of space in behind, then you're going to pay the ultimate price. At half-time, we sat here and I said, look, Haaland had a hat-trick, but what caught the eye was not the performance of Kevin De Bruyne, which was great, but watching him, the eye test, how sharp he looked. He's had these fitness issues, he's been back in the team, there's been some cameo roles, but, he's getting up to speed, and I thought tonight, albeit it was a weaker team they were against, certainly in terms of, where they are in the league, his sharpness, 4 assists is, we all know De Bruyne will pick a pass. We know if you set off him and give him space, he'll 9 times out of 10 play the right ball. But when you saw how sharp he was getting around the field, making those forward runs, to me, there is no doubt in his mind that he's just now focused on the second half of the season. And, of course, one thing plays into the other, because when he is starting to get back to this form and fitness, these goal scorers that they have on the side, and he's the best one that they do have, but they've got Julien Alvarez, they've got Phil Foden, they've got Doku, they've got Grealish, they've got all these other people, but that's only a benefit to this front line. When this guy's back fully fit, he's sharp, he's ready to go, and you're getting that type of performance out of him. Yeah, 5 goals, unbelievable. But Kevin De Bruyne back in there, feeding the big fella, I think was what it was all about, really.
How much did Luton play into City's hands today?
They did. And I said it earlier, I commend them for their efforts, and, it's a double-edged sword, because you give De Bruyne too much space and he'll punish you. If you get too close to him, he's always one step ahead, so he'll find the spare man and they'll play between the lines. And I think that they just, there were too many runners coming off of them, and where they were going man-to-man, as soon as it went up to Haaland, he laid it back. There was just runners everywhere, and then they just got picked off. But, I mean, listen, they get away. If they play like that in the Premier League, which they have done for most of the games, probably 50% of the time, they'll get away with results. But more often than not, when you're coming up against a team like this, there's a reason why teams don't set up that way against Man City, because you're just dealing with precision of the highest order and accuracy. You can't get near him. So, I mean, it's probably a lesson for him, but also he probably doesn't want to change too much the way he plays, because then, you set up a low block in one game and then the next game you go man for man. It might get a little bit confusing for the players. So I think it was, it was a little bit of a free hit for him today anyway, and he probably thought to himself, you know what, let's just go for it. The main focus for Rob Edwards, though, is staying in the Premier League for sure.
And how did you describe Kevin De Bruyne in this game?
I described him as the three-eyed raven.
Three-eyed raven, yes, which is a Game of Thrones reference, apparently, in which you were educating myself and Craig.
We found that out eventually.
Yeah, we got there. We got there in the end. As much as Jules as the cliche, one game at a time, we all know how massive March is for Manchester City when you look at their fixtures and you feel that Pep Guardiola has just kind of babied, nursed Kevin De Bruyne to this stage now, ready to unleash him, you feel, next month.
Yeah, completely. And I really believe that had De Bruyne played in the last few games, was already fit, let's say a month ago, if Haaland was the same case, and if he'd been scoring like freely for the last 3 games, I don't think they would have played tonight. I think he played them tonight because they needed much fitness. Maybe for Haaland, in Haaland's case, just a little bit of confidence because he's been missing a few chances, and we saw that at Bournemouth at the weekend again. And I think this was just perfect. In an ideal world, he doesn't play them tonight, for sure. But I think he felt that this was a game that he needed to play in terms of getting that match fitness, for getting maybe some of the chances that he missed for Haaland, for KDB just to get back to that kind of environment again. He only played a few minutes at the weekend. I think that was important. Otherwise, you don't play them in a game like this. And you probably don't even expect Luton to be so stupid and naive in the way they set up tactically and the plan that they had, because we've been really kind on the show that it was stupid. And it makes even a perfect night then, because of the game time that you gave to them too. The form that they had in that game is perfect, setting you perfectly for March and obviously April 1st, which would be the Arsenal game.
One negative, Kevin, we saw, of course, Jack Grealish coming off just before the end of the first half, Nedum. Pep Guardiola is suggesting once again it's his groin.
I think from a personal standpoint, these guys, when they have to spend time on the treatment table and away from doing the thing which they love doing, that's obviously hard for them. But when it keeps reoccurring, that's an even bigger issue itself. And as the guys have been saying, this is such an important part of the season for them, not just because it's towards the end of the season, but the fact you're playing Liverpool's, you're playing Man United, you're playing Arsenal, you're in the Champions League knockout rounds. This is a real significant time to be just missing so much football. And it is tough for him. He's just come back after being injured just a couple of weeks ago, and he's on the side now. How long will it take for him to come back? Will they be more cautious this time with getting him back? And when he does come back, does he now have the belief that he'll be able to stay on the field? These are tough questions that are going to need to be answered by him and by the medical team. And yeah, it's a shame to see that happen from him, because as well, he's a really big player for their City side, even though he hasn't been at his best throughout this season.
Aside from that, the treble is still very much a possibility once again for Manchester City. You take a look, just a reminder of how things stand in the Premier League, just 2 points separating the top three. Liverpool and Arsenal wouldn't have enjoyed watching that, Craig.
No, but I think there's a bit of realism in terms of what Luton tried to do. And I don't think we'll see that from any of the others that are playing Manchester City, unless they just want to chuck it from the start. But they had a go, and that's what they tried, and it failed. And I think it was obvious to everybody. But look, we talk about the injuries, and I feel for any player that has recurring injuries or any injuries. But it's kind of part and parcel, and it's frustrating for Jack Grealish himself. And it is, I suppose, a little bit for Pep Guardiola. But I just looked at the subs bench again, and it's scary. And then we go back to the game we had yesterday, and you look at the injury list that Liverpool have. I mean, it's horrendous. What they've done, they've lost one player. Potentially for another couple of weeks, maybe a month, I don't know. But it pales into insignificance to what Liverpool are facing, and that's obviously one of their title rivals. Arsenal, not so bad at the moment. I mean, I've always said City can lose. Out of the three teams going, and I said this yesterday, if Liverpool don't get those big players back and quick, 4 or 5 of them, they're not going to stay in this title race. You're not going to be able to do it with the Clarks, Dans, O'Connell's, as good as they did at the weekend. You're not going to be able to do it with these guys. So if they don't get Szoboszlai back, and they don't get Núñez back, and they don't get the others that are injured, Salah back, it's going to be a problem. And I suppose if Arsenal lose 2 or 3 as well, that's going to be an issue. The only side that can afford, in my opinion, to lose 2, 3, maybe even 4, and you could still go, they're still the team to beat, is Man City. So the Grealish injury is frustrating for the player. But in terms of the overall picture for this squad, guess what? De Bruyne didn't play the first half of the season. Haaland's had his injury problems as well. So they'll cope. Jack Grealish just has to figure out why this is, if it is the same, keeps re-recurring, what he's doing, what he needs to do differently, and take the required amount of rest, which is very difficult to do from a player perspective if you're going for an FA Cup, a Premier League, oh, by the way, and the Champions League again. It is so frustrating not to force yourself back.